The moment my daughter pressed her thumb into my wrist twice, slow, deliberate, the same way she used to do it when she was 9 years old and didn't want anyone to know she was scared. I felt every nerve I had go quiet and sharp at the same time. She was 33 now. We were sitting at my dining room table in Indianapolis, passing green beans, and her boyfriend of 5 months, a man named Pierce Dunmore, was explaining to my wife and me why the traditional financial system was, in his words, fundamentally designed to keep ordinary people on the outside looking in. I smiled and asked him to pass the bread. My name isn't important here. What matters is that I spent 26 years as a special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation, the CI division, the branch that handles financial crimes, not tax returns. I investigated money laundering, Ponzi schemes, offshore fraud, and the full spectrum of schemes that people with talent and ambition and no conscience construct to separate other people from what they spent their lives building. I retired 4 years ago at 61 and now consult part-time for a regional law firm handling white-collar defense. I know the architecture of financial fraud the way a carpenter knows wood grain. I can feel where it's going to split before it splits. My daughter Brooke is a nurse practitioner at a pediatric clinic on the north side of the city. She's sharp and steady and kind in a way that used to make me worry she was too kind for the world. She went through a divorce 8 months ago, a quiet civil end to a marriage that had slowly run out of whatever it needed to keep going. She'd kept the condo, split the retirement accounts, and come out the other side with $188,000 in a 401-nay rollover sitting in a brokerage account she hadn't decided what to do with yet. I knew that number because she'd asked me to look over the paperwork after the settlement. She'd met Pierce at a fundraising dinner for the clinic in late March. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried the easy confidence of someone who had spent years in rooms where confidence was the only currency that mattered. He described himself as a private capital allocator who worked with a select network of high-net-worth clients to access investment opportunities unavailable through conventional brokerages. He said it the way people say things they've practiced in front of a mirror. My wife, Joanne, had been in the kitchen finishing the cobbler when he started. She came in laughing at something Brooke had said from the other room, set the dish down, and settled into her chair as Pierce continued. He worked in real estate, he explained. Not the kind you could buy through a REIT, but direct equity positions in commercial development projects that institutional investors had been using to generate above-market returns for decades. The barrier to entry had historically been too high for most people, he said, but his firm had structured a vehicle that made it accessible to the right individuals. Joanne glanced at me once, just once. I asked Pierce what kind of registration his fund carried with the SEC. He smiled, and it was a practice smile, warm without being readable, and said the fund operated under a Regulation D exemption from SEC registration, which meant it was available only to accredited investors and wasn't subject to public registration requirements. That was actually part of what made it attractive, he said. Less overhead, faster movement of capital, better returns for investors who knew how to access it. Regulation D. It's a legitimate exemption that real private funds use every day. It's also the most frequently abused provision in federal securities law, because it hands fraudulent operators a clean, technically accurate answer to the registration question without requiring anything real to exist behind the door. I said that sounded interesting and offered him more water. Brooke hadn't looked at me while he talked. She'd been watching Pierce, smiling at the right moments, and when I leaned over to refill her glass, her hand rested near mine on the table, and her thumb pressed my wrist twice. We invented the signal when she was in 3rd grade. She'd had bad health anxiety as a kid. Nothing clinical, just the kind that made doctors' appointments feel enormous, and MRI machines feel like the end of everything. She was too proud to say she was scared, even at 8 years old, so we'd worked out a system together. 2 slow presses meant I need you, but I don't want to make this into a thing. 1 press back meant I'm here. We'd used it through stitches, a broken collarbone, a biopsy scare her sophomore year of college, and her father walking her down the aisle at a wedding that turned out to be both a beginning and an ending. She hadn't used it in 7 years. I pressed back once and kept my face entirely still. Pierce and Brooke left early that night. She said she had a morning shift. After the door closed, Joanne stood at the kitchen sink for a long moment without saying anything. "You went somewhere else when he talked about the fund," she said. "I went to work," I said. "How bad?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." She dried her hands and nodded once. 31 years of marriage, and she already understood what came next. Brooke texted me at 11:42 that night. "Just, can we talk tomorrow, not on the phone?" I drove to her condo the next afternoon. She met me at the door in her scrubs, still in from work, and I could see from the shadows under her eyes that she hadn't slept much. We sat at her kitchen table. She made coffee she didn't touch, and turned the mug slowly in her hands. "He's been talking to me about my rollover," she said. I waited. "He says it's sitting in a money market earning nothing, and he's right about that. I haven't done anything with it yet. He says his fund has returned between 18 and 24% annually for the past 6 years, and that if I got in at the next allocation window, which closes at the end of the month, I could see meaningful growth within the first year." She paused. "He sent me the offering documents last week." "How long has he been building toward this?" 2 months, maybe. He didn't bring up money at all for the first 3 months. He was just Pierce. She looked at the table. He remembered things. My mom's name, what clinic I work at, that I hate cilantro. He mentioned my grandfather's first name once, and then used it again 4 weeks later, just naturally, like it was part of his vocabulary now. The kind of remembering that makes you feel like someone is actually paying attention to you. She set the mug down. "He told me he loved me 2 weeks ago, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I kept going, and then the documents came. There was nothing I could say that would land right in that moment, so I didn't say anything." She needed to sit with the shape of it for a minute. After a while she looked up. "What do the documents mean?" "Forward them to me tonight." The offering documents arrived at 9:17. A private placement memorandum, 62 pages, formatted professionally with a clean letterhead. Meridian Capital Real Estate Partners, LLC. A registered address in Austin, Texas. A disclosure section at the back in small print that most people would skim straight through. I didn't skim it. The performance figures cited no independent auditor. The section describing the underlying real estate assets referred to a project schedule contained in a separate document, listed as Exhibit C, which was not attached and not linked. The fund's stated minimum investment was $25,000, with a preferred allocation tier for commitments over $100,000, which happened to be just slightly more than half of Brooke's rollover balance. The subscription deadline was the last day of the month. 17 days. I pulled up the Austin address. It was a registered agent and mail forwarding service on South Congress Avenue. It gave the documents a real street number. It did not provide an office, a staff, or a fund. I searched Meridian Capital Real Estate Partners in the SEC's EDGAR database. No registration. I checked the Texas State Securities Board's online records. Nothing. Then I ran Pierce Dunmore's name through FINRA broker check. He came up. Registered as a broker at an independent broker-dealer in Dallas from 2014 to 2019. Registration terminated. One formal disclosure on his record. A customer complaint settled, involving a recommendation to invest in an unsuitable private placement. The complainant was a retired school teacher, 67 years old. She had transferred $60,000 before the fund stopped communicating. She recovered $4,200. The settlement was paid by the firm's errors and omissions insurance. The amount was listed as confidential. A rehearsal, a smaller version with different names and a different city, refined and tried again. I knew 2 people I could call. The first was a woman named Tessa Hargrove, who had spent 18 years at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit before moving to the Indiana Securities Division as deputy director. We'd crossed paths on 2 separate investigations when I was still at CI, and we'd built the kind of mutual respect that doesn't require favors to exist before you pick up the phone. The second was a man named Don Kimball, who had been a forensic accountant for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Indiana for 15 years, and now ran his own practice. Don could read a financial offering document the way a radiologist reads film. Not just what's there, but the specific shape of what's absent. I texted both of them that night. Tessa called at 7:40 the next morning. I gave her Pierce's name, the FINRA disclosure, the Austin address, the fund name. She went quiet for a moment. "Give me a few hours," she said. Don called at 8:15. I read him sections of the private placement memorandum over the phone. He stopped me twice to ask me to repeat things. When I finished, he was quiet long enough that I checked my screen to see if the call had dropped. "The project schedule," he said. "Exhibit C, you said it's not there." "It's not attached." That's where the actual real estate would have to be described. The parcels, the development agreements, the title documentation. Without Exhibit C, there are no assets. There's a document claiming assets exist, and a reference to a document that would describe them, and nothing else. If someone's invested and the fund claimed the properties underperformed or the deals fell through, there would be no way to verify those properties ever existed, or those deals were ever real. He paused. "It's a frame without anything inside it. You could claim anything hung there, or nothing at all." Tessa called back at 11:15. I could hear in her voice that this was going to be larger than either of us was used to seeing up close. "Pierce Dunmore, 39, she said. "The FINRA disclosure you found, we know about it. That was the one that made it into the formal system. There are 2 other complaints that were resolved before filing, both involving private placements, both to older investors. One of them was a widower in Plano who moved $90,000 after a woman in his grief support group recommended Pierce's services. He didn't want to pursue it, said he was embarrassed, said he should have known better." She paused, and I heard the particular flatness in her voice that I recognized from a long time ago. "He shouldn't have. That's not how this works." "Is Meridian registered anywhere?" "No. Nothing in Texas, Indiana, Colorado, or anywhere else we've checked." "So he's running a barefaced Ridge D fraud." "It appears so. What we need is him on record making the full pitch and requesting a commitment. If your daughter agrees to meet with him and records it herself, her own phone, her own conversation, that recording is admissible." I drove back to Brooke's condo that afternoon. I sat across from her at the kitchen table and told her everything. The Edgar search, the Austin address, Don's analysis of the missing exhibit, the FINRA disclosure, the retired schoolteacher in Dallas, the widower in Plano who lost $90,000 and was too ashamed to say it out loud to anyone who could help. Brooke sat completely still through all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, very quietly, "He cried when he said he loved me. I didn't think. I thought that part was real." I let that sit. "Maybe some of it was," I said finally. "The ones who are very good at this don't fabricate everything. They find the true parts and arrange them deliberately. That's what makes it hard to see from inside." She looked at the table. "What do I need to do?" I explained the recording. Indiana is a one-party consent state. She could record her own conversations without disclosing it. If Pierce sat down with her and made the pitch, described the fund, named the return projections, provided wire transfer instructions, and requested a commitment, her recording of that conversation was usable. "I need you to let him get all the way to the ask," I said. "Don't rush him. Don't tip him off. Be a woman who has done her thinking and is almost ready to say yes." She looked at me with the same steady look she'd had since she was small, the one that never flinched at hard things. "I did 2 years of clinical rotations in emergency medicine," she said. "I can sit across from someone for an hour." She texted Pierce that evening and told him she'd been thinking seriously about the allocation, and had a few questions before she committed. Could they meet for coffee and go through the details properly? He responded in less than 20 minutes. Warm, unhurried, genuinely pleased. Everything calibrated to give her no reason to feel any different than she had before. He suggested a coffee shop near her clinic, Thursday afternoon. He said he was glad she was ready to move forward. Thursday morning I came back one more time. We sat at her kitchen table, and I walked her through exactly what to do. Phone in her breast pocket, voice memo app running before she got out of the car. Let him talk. If he paused, let the silence sit. People fill silence, especially when they're selling something. Ask clarifying questions in a neutral voice. Don't be eager, don't be cold. Be a woman who has already decided and just wants to hear it once more before she signs. "How are you feeling?" I asked before she left. She thought about it honestly. "Angry," she said, "but the kind of angry that makes you very focused." "Stay in that," I said. I drove home and sat with Joanne in the living room. She made tea. We watched the birds at the backyard feeder. I checked my phone every few minutes and told myself to stop. Brooke texted at 3:58 p.m. Got it, calling you in 15. Her voice on the phone was steady but thin, the specific way voices get when the adrenaline is still finding the exit. Pierce had been thorough and clear, she told me. He'd described the fund structure, private real estate development, preferred equity positions, secured by the underlying properties. He'd quoted the projected returns, 18 to 22% annually, sometimes higher in strong markets. He'd referenced the closing date, end of the month, the final allocation window for the year. He'd explained the investment tiers, noted that a commitment above $100,000 qualified her for the preferred return class. He'd given her wire instructions for a Nevada LLC account. He told her the capital would be deployed within 72 hours of receipt. 72 hours. I knew exactly what that meant. By the time anyone recognized the fund was a fiction and the LLC account had been drained, 72 hours was more than enough time to run the money through enough layers to make recovery close to impossible. I called Tessa that evening. We have the recording, I said. Send it securely tonight, she said. I'll listen. She called me the next morning at 7:05. It's enough, she said. We're moving today. I didn't ask for operational details. What I can tell you is that Pierce Dunmore was taken into custody at his apartment building in Broad Ripple on Saturday morning. Brooke called me while it was happening, standing in the parking lot of her clinic 2 hours before her shift started, her voice steadier than I expected. They called me early this morning, she said. They said it was done. Good, I said. How are you doing? She thought about it for a moment, like I've been holding my breath for 2 months, and just now remembered I'm allowed to stop. The investigation that followed revealed that Pierce had run variations of the same scheme in 3 other states: Texas, Colorado, and Ohio. Meridian Capital Real Estate Partners was one of 2 fraudulent fund vehicles he'd operated under different names in different cities. Across all the victims investigators were able to establish, 6 people total, the confirmed losses exceeded $650,000. Some of those people had already transferred money before Pierce ever walked into a clinic fundraiser in Indianapolis and introduced himself to my daughter over shrimp cocktail and a glass of wine. Brooke was the only one who hadn't lost $1. 3 weeks later she came for Sunday dinner. Just the 3 of us, her, Joanne, and me. Joanne made her pot roast, the one she'd been making since Brooke was in middle school, and we sat at the same table where, a month earlier, I'd watched a man with practiced warmth spend an entire evening walking my daughter toward something she couldn't fully see yet. Brooke was quieter through most of dinner. Not the tense quiet of the weeks before, something softer. Like someone who has set down a weight they'd been carrying long enough to forget it was a weight. She helped Joanne clear the plates without being asked, the way she always did growing up. When Joanne went upstairs to call her sister, Brooke sat back down across from me with her hands around her wine glass and looked at the middle distance for a moment. I keep going back to the first moment I knew, she said. Not at your dinner table. Not when the documents came. Before all of that, the first time he brought up my rollover, he called it money that was just sitting there, not working for you, and something small went wrong inside me. But I talked myself almost all the way out of it. Almost, I said. She looked at me. You reached out. You used the signal at my dinner table, with him sitting right there, in a room full of people. That's not someone who talked herself out of it. That's someone who got 90% of the way there, and then did the one thing that made every other thing possible. It felt embarrassing, she said, to admit I'd let it get that far. That's what the whole design depends on, I said. Not just the promise of the return, not just the documents, the embarrassment. By the time the investment conversation starts, the relationship already feels real, because in some ways, parts of it genuinely were. The time spent, the attention paid, the sense of being known by someone. Walking away from it means admitting you were deceived by someone you let close. Most people can't make themselves do that quickly enough. Outside the kitchen window, the November sky had gone the particular gray-blue that makes everything inside feel warmer by contrast. I could hear Joanne's voice upstairs, easy and distant. Is he going to prison? Brooke asked. That's for a jury to decide, I said. What I can tell you is that the recording is clear, The forensic accounting on his accounts is strong, and 6 other people now have a real chance at some form of accountability because you didn't let him finish what he came to Indianapolis to do. She nodded slowly. Then, I'm glad I still remembered the signal. So am I said. And Brooke, you came to me. You used something we invented for a 3rd grader who was scared of blood draws, and you trusted me to understand it 24 years later, across a dinner table. Don't ever stop doing that. She smiled at that, small and real, the kind that doesn't perform anything. Joanne came back downstairs, and we moved to the living room, and half-watched a movie none of us were particularly invested in. Joanne fell asleep on the couch, with a blanket pulled up to her chin. Brooke and I talked quietly about nothing important, her caseload, a funny thing that had happened at the clinic, whether the pot roast was better this time or exactly the same as always. Around 10, she said she should head home. I walked her to the door and she hugged me the way she's been hugging me since she was small, entirely. There are things I want to say plainly, as someone who spent more than 2 decades working financial crime. Romance-based investment fraud is not a new scheme, and it is not a problem that only affects people who aren't paying attention. The people who run it are not looking for victims who are naive. They are specifically looking for people who are emotionally open, people who have recently experienced loss or transition, who are hungry for connection, who want to believe that what they're feeling is real. Divorced adults, widows and widowers, people who just came through something hard and are looking for a reason to believe in something good. These are not marks. They are people at entirely natural moments of vulnerability, and practiced operators know how to identify them and exactly how to appear to be the good thing they're hoping for. The red flags are almost always visible in retrospect, or to someone standing outside the situation. A fund promising 18 to 24% annual returns, consistently over time. Real markets don't produce that reliably, and any fund claiming otherwise deserves serious scrutiny before you commit $1. Any pitch that creates urgency around a closing window or a deadline. A fund that cannot be found in the SEC's EDGAR system or on FINRA's broker check. A registered address that turns out to be a mail forwarding service. An offering document that references exhibits that aren't attached. None of these things are absolute guarantees of fraud, but every one of them is an invitation to stop and look harder before you move money. You can verify any registered investment advisor or broker in the country through FINRA BrokerCheck at brokercheck.enra.org. You can search registered fund offerings through the SEC's EDGAR system at sec.gov. Both are free. Both take less than 10 minutes. In the context of a 6-figure investment decision, 10 minutes is not a large number. And if someone you love reaches out to you, in whatever way they know how, with whatever signal the two of you have, please listen before they have to find another way to ask. My daughter pressed her thumb into my wrist twice at a dinner table in Indianapolis. We had invented that signal for a 9-year-old's fear of medical appointments. She used it at 33 because some part of her understood, before she was fully ready to put words to it, that she needed someone outside the situation to look clearly at what was happening. That instinct, the one that reaches before the conscious mind is ready to say why, is worth more than any offering document ever printed. We didn't lose $1, but we came close, and the difference, in the end, was the length of 2 small presses against a wrist, and a daughter who still trusted her father enough to reach. If something feels wrong, it is not nothing. It almost never is, and if you have someone in your life who would understand the signal, even an old one, even a quiet one, use it. Don't wait until you're sure. Use it while you're still almost sure it's nothing. That is exactly when it matters most.